1, 2, 3. Oh, you guys are good. All right. So, first thing you're going to hear is a couple of horn honks or maybe a couple of bell rings. That's because David loves playing with all the toys on this roof. But really, this is an operating railroad. So we don't want anybody getting run over. So if you guys are out here looking at the trains and messing around the shop and stuff, you hear 2 bells and whistles, that means we're moving something. So look around. If you're ringing 3 times, that means we're going to go backwards. 1 time means we're stopping. So if you take a look to your right, you'll see a magnificently beautiful, wonderful car right here, the 52. It took 5 years to make it look that nice. And you can go in it and look inside, and there's a lot of real nice painting and etched glass, and everything's beautiful. So take a good look at it and kind of remember it in your mind, because when we get down here a little farther, I'm going to show you one that we haven't started on yet, and that's what this one looked like before we did 5 years of work on it. You'll be impressed. That's why we want you to be impressed with us. But this one's a second-class car for passengers. It only has 1 bathroom. First-class car has got 2 bathrooms. We have 3 of those cars. They're from the 1890s. That one we finished. Inside, you can go inside with a docent and you can see our shop. There's another one in there that we've been working on for a couple of years. So it's about half done. And then we'll show you this other one down here we haven't started on. And you get a real clear picture of what it takes to restore a 1890s rail car. So in the shop, we have a number of different things we're working on. We're building a box car, and we have another RailBus that's red instead of green, and it broke down this morning, so it's in there. And we have our number 5 engine, which is a 1875 steam engine that was on our actual railroad back in the 1800s. And then it didn't run for many, many years. Then it went to Universal Studios and they used it as a prop, and it's in about half a dozen or maybe a couple dozen movies. And then we got it back in non-operating condition. So it took us 3 years to rebuild it, and we got it running. Turns out that it is the oldest operating narrow gauge steam engine in the United States. Right. So we're pretty proud of that guy. So everything you see in our yard has been fixed up in our shop. When we get up there in horrible shape, luckily we have people that know how to do woodwork and metal work, just about everything you can imagine. And they
use the term narrow gauge.
Yep.
I don't need to explain that.
I haven't yet, but I will. Thank you. Yeah, so this is the before picture right here. So that's what it looked like before we started working on that number 52.
Whoa.
So what happens is we have to take this totally down to the tracks, tear it all apart, save whatever we can that's good, and a lot of it isn't, and then rebuild it, manufacturing the pieces we need. That's why we have to have a wood shop and everything here, because you can't buy anything at Home Depot. And so we have to make whatever we have to make, and we'll work our way all the way up to the top, and it'll turn out like that one over there. So get a chance to go check it out. So we negotiated real hard to get this, and we paid $1 for it. Now Bob here thinks
Grossly overcharged.
way too much because it's a 5-year project, and it cost us $3,500 to get it here, and it almost broke in half. So we're leaving the museum yard, and we're going to go on to the neighbor's yard. Luckily, we have a good working relationship with our neighbors. They let us run our trains on their property. And the neighbor is the in-town campground. Some of you may be staying at the in-town campground. A lot of people do, and they come and visit us. The in-town campground is actually voted #1 in the country 2 years in a row. So it's quite a nice campground. They have camping and RV spaces, and they have glamping as well. Now we stopped here to tell you a little teeny bit about gold mining, because this whole area was pretty much founded by the Europeans because of gold mining. Nevada County produced more gold during the gold rush than any place else in the United States. So in 1848, they found gold about 30 miles south of here in Coloma. And when the news got out all over the country and then the world, people just came rushing in here in the 49. So you probably all heard of the 49ers. That's where that term came from. And so about 1857, a couple of guys came over here and they found gold right on this mound. So they went and filed a mining claim called the Mohawk mining claim. And they proceeded to dig 2 shafts on this property, both of them about 150 feet deep, and they found a lot of gold. And when they ran out of gold, they took it all and they took off and left those shafts wide open. They weren't worried about anybody falling in them or anything. Well, when they went to put the campground in, the city said it's a great place for a campground, but there are 2 150-foot deep shafts on that property somewhere. We don't know where because it's been 140 years ago. So they started working and they found one when they were building a road, filled it in, made sure no kids or dogs fall in there, but they never found the second one. So we stop here because if you look at this camp space, it's kind of weird the way the dirt all comes down around the edges and it's perfectly flat in the bottom. It doesn't look natural. And when it rains around here, which we get a lot of rain, it doesn't collect there. So we figure the other mine shaft must be right here somewhere, and that water's all flowing into the mine shaft. So last year, Bob was telling this story. He tells it better than I do, but there was a guy sitting here at the table, just had his morning coffee, and he just set up his tent, and he listened, and we went on down the way here, and it takes us about 20 minutes when we come back. He was totally gone. Yeah, he packed up, he was out of here. There was one shoe left there, though. We aren't sure what happened with that. So a lot of people do ask, what is a narrow gauge railroad? And why is there a narrow gauge railroad? Well, in this country, it was decided in the 1860s that the standard gauge for the whole country would be 4 foot 8.5 inches between the rails. That way we could get commerce all the way from the east coast to the west coast and back again without having to change trains, change cars, and all that kind of thing. So narrow gauge is anything less than that. So when somebody says narrow gauge, they kind of have to tell you what size narrow gauge it is, because there's many different sizes of narrow gauges. We happen to be on a 3 foot wide narrow gauge. So when we tell people our narrow gauge, we should say, okay, we have a 3 foot wide narrow gauge. If you look to your left, you see that ore cart is sitting on an 18-inch narrow gauge. So both of these are narrow gauges, they're just different widths between the rails. So that is an ore cart, and the reason you have an ore cart is you have a drift mine, which is what this is depicting right here. This is not a real mine, this is just a display. A drift mine goes into the mountain and goes straight down. When you build one of those, you start digging and you add rail as you go, and you keep bringing all the dirt out with ore carts. And the ore carts have the dirt and the gravel and the gold and any rocks with gold in them. And then you crush it or do whatever you have to do to get the gold out of it. And they can go into the mountain a mile. They just keep adding more rail. So this was the actual Mohawk mine ore cart that they had here in 1857.
Why doesn't it say Mohawk Mine above Northern Drift?
Because this whole mine was Mohawk mine in 1857. Two guys.
But it's titled anyway. I don't see anything that says Mohawk Mine.
I don't know, it should be on Alright, on the right you'll see a tree which is very close to our RailBus. So we have to be careful, not like Bob. Otherwise you'll have a new dozen. We call that the dozen tree. Alright, we're coming to our first switchback. So what we're going to do, we're going to go through here. Bob is going to hop off and he's going to manually switch the track. Switch this switch right here, and we will back up down that other rail. So a switchback, a lot of people think is a term for hiking trails, but it really was an old railroad term before they used it for hiking trails. And because railroads have metal wheels on metal rail, and they cannot go up a very steep grade. They can only do about 3 or 4%. So then they have to go up and switch back, and go up and switch back in order to get over the mountain. Yes, sir.
Why couldn't we just go straight?
Well, here we can't go straight because that's a dead end. But at the time they put this in, I guess the hotel didn't want to track from that side. So now you'll notice Bob is in the back of the train. There's a reason for that. Anytime you back up anything on the railroad, you can't see very well. You can imagine if we had railroad cars behind us, that'd be even worse. So you always put somebody on the back, and that person watches out for dogs or frisbees or whatever, and he signals to the driver. So Bob's signaling to David, and he would tell him to stop if we needed to stop. So he's basically letting him know it's all clear. Now this is the meadow I was talking about. The Remy's owned the motel we'll see in a little bit down here. They had a 2-foot gauge railroad in here before we came. So Mrs. Remy did all the gardening here. She had beautiful flowers and bushes and shrubs, and she planted all the trees so that in the fall, it's beautiful fall colors. And Mr. Remy ran the little railroad for his guests at the hotel. I don't know. Ramy, it's Remy? Ramy. Okay, Ramy.
It was good.
All right. Well, my pronunciation. All right, so the Ramys did all this originally. And so we always like to talk about that because people love coming down here and having family time, or there's been weddings down here, car shows, all kinds of fun things. We actually have brought the wedding party in on our RailBus before. To your left, you'll see some parked cars. Those are just displays, so you can kind of see what some of the different cars are that we have on our railroad. And we're coming up to some that have logs on them. Logging was a huge industry in this area. So our railroad carried a lot of gold and a lot of things pertaining to the gold industry, and then a lot of things pertaining to the logging industry. In addition to passengers and supplies and anything else that was needed to come up here from Colfax.
Is that the same size track as this?
Yep, that's 3-foot gauge. Everything here is 3-foot gauge. So what happened is they put the transcontinental railroad in from the east coast to the west coast, and it went right from Colfax. So once that happened, it made it worthwhile to put a little railroad in from here to Colfax to move all this stuff down through the main line. We have to be very careful when we go across switches. The switches are a lot of different angles and so forth, and we can derail on them. Around here when we derail, we just drop off the track a little bit. It's not like a big derailment where you have a wreck and all that stuff. But it still takes us about a half hour to get back on the path. So we try not to do that. To your right, you'll see a spur taking off. That spur is going to be our new line. It's going to run down Railroad Avenue. Railroad Avenue is right here to our right. And that was the original railroad bed of the Nevada County Narrow Gauge Railroad back in the day. If you follow it down about a half mile, you come to Sacramento Street, and that's where the people live. We're going to put rail all the way down road all the way to Sacramento Street. We'll be able to run our speed engine on the road down. So I mentioned gold mining was a huge thing in this area. And so we talked about the drift mining, shaft mining, which is hard rock mining. Then you all know about the gold miner with a donkey and gold sand. That's placer mining. So there's one more type of mining. So if you look to your left as we slow down and stop here, you'll see a big metal pipe-looking thing. And that is, I heard somebody say monitor. So somebody knows what a monitor is. So that is a hydraulic mining apparatus. Hydraulic means water. And so they call that device a monitor. What happens with this is the water comes in from on the left side from reservoirs up in the mountains, and it has about 400 pounds pressure, water pressure. It goes through the turret and comes out the other end. And if you look at the right hand end, you'll see it's quite a bit smaller than the left hand end. So it's kind of like putting your thumb on a hose. It sprays farther and harder. So what happens when that high pressure comes in there and gets reduced down, that monitor can actually squirt water 1/8 of a mile and just devastate the side of a mountain. So that's what they would do, is they would find places that had gold that wasn't deep in the earth, and they would just take these monitors and they'd start spraying the mountain, and they would wash all the gravel, all the dirt, all the gold, all the trees, everything would go down into
through a
the
sluice
river.
box.
Yeah, they would run it through a sluice box that was over a mile long, and they'd run all that through there, and the gold is heavy, and they would use mercury. They'd add mercury because that attracts the gold, and the gold would settle to the bottom of the sluice box, and then they'd go pick the gold up off the bottom. So what happened though with all the dirt and all the gravel? It all went down the creeks, down the rivers, down the delta, into the San Francisco Bay. And over the course of about 20 years, there were hundreds of these running in the Sierra Nevada. They ended up moving over 1.5 billion, with a B, cubic yards of material. So that's just a phenomenal amount of material. They say it would be the same as digging out the Panama Canal 2 times. So all that stuff went into the rivers, and the riverbeds would rise, and it went into the delta and the bay and those rows as well. And so then the rivers all started flooding real badly and ruining all the crops in the valley. And as you probably all know, the Central Valley is a major worldwide area for growing crops. And so the farmers got together, and one farmer named Woodruff, he kind of spearheaded it, but a lot of them had a class action suit, and they sued the miners, said you're ruining our livelihood. So it went to court in San Francisco, and sure enough, the judge agreed that the miner didn't have a right to ruin the livelihood of the farmers. So he ruled in favor of the farmers, and even though it wasn't an environmental lawsuit, it did turn out to be the first environmental lawsuit in the country, inadvertently. Back then, they didn't really think we'd ever run out of anything, but they were wrong.
In the sluice, did they have to shut off the monitors, clean up the sluice box periodically?
Yep, they would do that at night. So now we're coming to the end of our line. We're going to go around a loop. Now when the Ramies put in this rail, it was 2 feet wide, and they could make a sharp turn because they had smaller equipment. It's kind of a sharp turn for our big equipment, and it'll squeal really loud, so you might want to put your hands over your ears. Now, David has a magic button on his dash here, and it puts water down in front of the wheel. The water kind of lessens the wheel. But even with the water, it has light.
This rail has to be replaced. So make sure that has to be replaced.
And his question is whether this rail would ever have to be replaced. And yes, it could. We monitor it all the time, and we keep it up all the time. And with the little amount of use that we put on it, it probably will be way out front and gone. But eventually it will wear it out, just because every time we come around it burns off a little bit of metal. So on the left side you'll see a big granite chunk. Well, that's not just a rock, that actually goes up the mountain hundreds of feet. It's a part of the mountain. So when we changed this to 3-foot dimension rail, and our buses, we had to make a little bit bigger corner, we were hitting that rock because it was sticking out this way a little bit. So we went to a mining company and said, can you do something about that? And they were like, yep, no problem. They sent a couple guys down. You can see the drill holes where they drilled into this rock. And they weren't going to blast because of all the motels right there. So we didn't want to blow all the windows out. So they used a dry chemical. They put that in there, and then they put a liquid chemical, and the chemical reaction caused 1,800 pounds per square inch of pressure, and overnight it cracked all that rock off. They put it over on this side and strengthened the rail. Well, that was great. We were all very excited until they gave us the bill, which is normal, right? When you get your car worked on, you get the bill, you're like, okay, you can keep my car. But it was $5,000 for 2 days' work. These two guys. So we were moping around, telling everybody our sob story, and the Ramies said, hey, we love what you're doing. You're keeping the history alive in this area, and you keep the train alive. We'll pay that for you. So they paid the $5,000. So we call this rock 5K Rock in their honor. So if any of you want to donate $5,000, we'll name a rock after you.
What year was that?
Oh, I wasn't here, but I believe it was in the 90s.
2016.
Was it that late?
Yeah.
Oh, 2016.
Yeah, it was like
2016.
wow. Yeah,
97 leaving 5K long.
Okay, so sometimes we can't get out of that corner right there because of the sharpness of the curve and we're on the incline. So David has a better magic button. I mean, he's got gadgets in the war up there. He just has so much fun. Anyway, and that drops sand out in front of the wheel so we can get traction. So the water reduces the noise and the sand gives us the traction. If that doesn't work, we all have to have push. Okay, it looks like we got one. Alright, so this rig you're riding in is actually a 1930s school bus. So they took a school bus, they took all the running gear out from under it. This is in the early 70s. What happened? We got a brand new Dodge Dart, a 1972 Dodge Dart. Put the running gear underneath, put a new motor in there, a swing 6 motor. Put some railroad wheels on it, and away we went. Now, the fellow that had that done was Glenn Bell. The reason he had it done is he wanted to start an amusement park down by Tuolumne. So he bought out an old mill that had gone out of business, and they had 3-foot gauge rail there that they used for the mill. He was going to run people around in these cars. So we have this one and another one that's red that we also have. And he unfortunately started his little endeavor at a very, very hard time. In the early 70s, we had an oil embargo. Now, there's a couple of you on here that might remember that, but a lot of you probably don't remember it. And what the oil embargo was all about is the Middle East had all the oil and we didn't have our own reserve. So we had to pay their prices, and we said no, and they said fine, you don't get any oil. So we had gas rationing, which was we could only get gasoline for our cars 3 days a week, depending on what your license number was. So some people could get it Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Some people could get it Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Then you'd go out to the gas station. The line sometimes would be 4 or 5 hours long. And then you get up to the gas station, they might be out of gas. It was a pretty frantic time. People were not driving all over the place, wasting gas. So, Glenn Bell's little amusement ride went out of business and went bankrupt because people weren't driving up there. They were using their gas for going to work. Well, we don't want to feel too bad for him because he was an entrepreneur and he decided he'd start a restaurant. And it turns out he did pretty well with his restaurant, and probably everybody on this bus at least wanted his restaurant. I don't know about the railroad, if you go to the museum. They have a lot more knowledge than I do. But basically, a couple of brothers decided that they saw an opportunity, and that this area up here needed some way to get down to coal platforms. It took a couple of years. Then the brothers wanted him to be the supervisor, so he did that for a while, and they wanted to sell him the railroad, so he bought the railroad. He and his wife ran it for about 10 years, and then he passed away. So Sarah, she could have just retired and gone to San Francisco and lived happily ever after, but she was a business person herself, and she thought she could just run that railroad. She didn't need anybody else. So she did. She ran it for 12 years, and she was the only woman that owned and operated a railroad in the United States. So she was quite the person. She did a great job. She paid off all the bills and paid money to the investors. She actually shortened the line by 2 miles, which saved time going back and forth. And everything she did was to the benefit of the railroad and to the benefit of the people in the area. So we're real proud of her. She's our hero. And she did all that before the government thought women should vote. So it was a different time.
Are these railroad ties specific ties, and are they creosoted?
But these are all creosoted ties, And I think in this area, they're made out of fur. But in different places in the country, they were made out of different types. She went to San Francisco and she lived there, lived to be 93 years old. She was there for nearly 20 years or so. We're going to stop here for just a moment. And if you look to your left, across Gold Run Creek, you'll see some nice, beautiful granite boulders nestled in the confluence of pines. We stop here because of our Native American people, the Nissenon tribe. They were our local Indians, and there were other tribes too, but this was the largest one. And they all would come down here in the fall, and they would get all the acorns and bring them down to these rocks. And they would hold a rock in their hand, and they would grind the acorn between the boulder and the rock in their hand. They would do that for days and days and hours, and for hundreds of years. And they eventually wore divots in these rocks. So if you go over there, which you can do, walk across the bridge and go over there and you can pick the pine needles off, you'll see these divots that are about 4 to 6 inches deep in the rock that were ground there by the ladies grinding the acorns over hundreds and hundreds of years. It's quite interesting.
So they had to wash it to get the tannin out, is that
They
right?
did. Acorns are not edible. So the creek being here was to their advantage. Burned all our cars, burned all the wood off with the metal. So we didn't have any captured cars running. We had a few little inefficient cars, things here and there. Fortunately, our number 5 engine got saved from that boom
97
because
injured
the
yard
Universal
limit.
Studios wanted it for movies.
Copy, 97
So
inbound
it
from the
didn't
air
get
limit.
made into equipment. So our driver today is David. So he's doing a great job with all his employees and gadgets. Stuff is on the rail. Bob is our switchman. He does all the work around here. My name's Jeffrey. I hope you all had a really good time today. And bring all your friends, your neighbors, your family, enemies, anybody you want back over here to see the museum. Now you'll all be getting out on my side. So watch your head. As you see this green board right here, take a lot of hats off. And you'll get out of the bus, you'll turn to your right, you'll walk behind the bus. And I thank you all once again for coming today so that we can play with our toys.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Dirt is dirt. God made dirt, dirt don't hurt.
Yeah.
There goes. Okay,
Oh, Bob's not pushing.
well, he wasn't, but now he is. Oh, please don't. Yeah, get that light up.
Yeah.
Oh, don't show it. Too far. In. Ah, we got it. All right.
got it. Just enough weight.
Far out.
Pretty good. Take
I guess it was that half a piece of pizza.
There you go.
And everything's full.
Oh, good.
Yeah, both last 2 rides are full.
Good. We're being busy.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
I like it.
Every time.
All right, we're good.